when you hear them introduce men, it's like Titan, but a woman has to be an Amazon. It's like, there's so much more about the verbs and the words we use that for men are very transformational, and for women they're very transactional. And I just want people to be aware as you're getting brief, as you're creating the next story that you're going to tell. And this literally can be on your Twitter. We're constantly being barraged by images of women that are scary, that you don't want your children to see. I mean, there's so many images that you can't sit and watch television today as a family without you not being uncomfortable as a woman. And I see that every single day on almost every single show. And the challenge we have is that there's not a lot of pushback, and there's not a lot of research being done and shared on how to change these images. And for me, that's a big problem we have, because the only people that can do that are the people that are creating those images. And so for me, it's very important that we create positive images of women. It's very important that we have lead roles of women that is not about them fighting over a man. That is also another thing that has dominated our television screens today, is that there are always three women fighting over one guy, even though we're not running out of men in our country. Our country still has almost an even split of men and women, so there really shouldn't be this image that there are no more men in town, but that is the image that is continually perpetrated in our society. Once again, there's also this sort of, when women are emancipated or empowered, there's also this over-sexualization of them, and then almost labeling them as too sexual. So there's almost a lot of times women feel caught in the middle of, how do I dress, what do I wear, who do I look like, what do I do? And so you hear people like saying, people like Tiwa Savage is too sexual. Tiwa is just Tiwa, she's doing what she wants to do, she's wearing what she wants to wear, and I always hate when I hear that from women. So once again, don't be part of a conversation that is objectifying or reinforcing what you think other people want to hear you say. There's a lot of work now to try to make sure that that more women on panels and more women pictures come up. I'm gonna just ask you, can I see this, please? Can I see your booklet? So I picked this up this morning, sorry guys. And the first thing I see is a page full of men. Once again, this is not your fault. This is just the world we live in. So the world is full of these images. So these are experts. These are the people you see as experts. I think we have two women on this page, one woman on this page. But that first page that we see is once again purely male. This is what happens on panels. This is why when people invite me to do speaking engagements like this or be on panels, I say yes. Not because I like standing in front of people and talking. To me, this is one of the most terrifying things people can do, but I do it because I think it's important for our voices to be heard. A lot of times what happens is when you see a woman on a panel as an expert on TV, on CNN is very ruthless for this. There's always a sense like, oh, we don't understand what she's saying, or why is her voice squeaky? Or why is she's wearing too much makeup? I'm always like, what do you know about makeup? Who made you who made you an expert over makeup? She's not really there to talk about makeup. Oh, they're like, why isn't she wearing makeup? It's like, a woman can choose to wear or not wear makeup. This is every time you watch a panel on CNN, watch that. Every time CNN has a new anchor, watch it. There's constant complaining about these anchors. There's constant sexualizing of them. They're not feminine enough. They're too man. They're too this. And this continues to be reinforced until we make ourselves more visible, which is part of the theme for this, which is making yourself more visible, which is when you're creating stories, create stories of women experts. Create people seeing women at the table. Create people seeing women, even if they don't have a place to sit, they're standing, but they're part of that conversation. And I think for me, that's one of the things that we have to be much more conscious of. And we also have to, even as other women, we have to be conscious of how we criticize women that are sitting at the table. Sometimes when we hear a woman's voice, it doesn't feel like an expert. But when we hear a woman's voice saying, oh, this is how you wear your makeup, that feels like an expert. When we say, oh, a woman says, this is how you invest your money, or when a woman says, this is how we need to look at these political hotbeds of information, or this is what's happening in the IDP camps, there's sort of a tendency for us to disconnect from that And I think that's why it's important for women's voices not to be drowned out. And the only way to do that is to be visible and to be present and to show up. If you don't show up, if only men show up, we can't ask the world to hear our voices or to see the world as men and women. The world will always be developed, and the norms of the world and the way the world hears voices will always be through a male voice. And so to me, those are some of the really big opportunities we have when we talk about being visible. The other thing that I believe that we need to be aware of is, now that we know that language is a problem, how people hear our voices is a problem, unequal representation, we're never going to be able to have equal representation at the table. So we need to say, okay, what are the things that we need to do to combat that, to start to shift that, to start to change the way we do that? The number one thing is how we tell our stories. And I always say, everyone here has so much more power today because you're publishing, you're telling your story, and you're creating stories. The other thing is that you're getting briefs. As you get these briefs from companies, try to create a different story for women. Try to tell a different story of women. Right now, there's sort of this monolithic Nigerian woman. Try to create characters that are complex, that have depth, that are sometimes unpredictable. They don't have to be nice. They can be unpredictable. I think we saw that with the Maggie ad. There was a little bit of backlash, but what that did was open a conversation. So don't be afraid to do things that can start a conversation as you also sort of go on this journey and you're creating these new, strong, new female characters. Don't use language that is transactional when you're describing them. And when you're working with journalists, because once again, there was a press conference here today, there's always an opportunity to say, these are the type of stories we want to come out of this. And really in Nigeria, if you brief journalists properly, they will give you those headlines, which is why it's so important to make sure you work with journalists, even as you go out there to tell your story, that you work with journalists to make sure that you give them the headlines that you want out there. Once again, be out there, be visible, make sure your story is being told, but make sure you also direct the way your story is being told. We're going to all these women events in which people are telling us to support each other, to be this, to be that. We're talking about sort of all this black girl magic, and we are women supporting women. And so many women have supported me in my career, but the stereotype is women don't help women, and that actually is not our story. I think we have to call things what they are, and I think it's important for us to start to encourage journalists. We all have journalist friends to say, why would you write this story that didn't say rape? I mean, I see headlines all the time about either pastor defiling a 13-year-old or this happened, but when a woman kills a man, it is clearly, it's called murder. It is not like, oh, she accidentally pulled a knife and the knife killed him. No, it's called woman murders man. And so if a man rapes a woman, it should be man rapes woman. And I think those are the words that we need to be more conscious when we use them. And I think we need to, even if it means bringing in civil society to help you understand how to use these words and how to weave them into your story, I think it's important to get people involved and understand better how to tell your female stories. Because women are buying things. Women have huge buying power, and they need to see themselves truly represented in our creative briefs, in our commercials, in our media spaces. I think that we need to make sure that more women's stories are told, more women are celebrated, and I think that when you have the opportunity to celebrate women, please don't use transactional language. Make sure you're using transformational words. Thank you so much for the short time I've had. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Sandra. So a couple of weeks, a couple of months ago, I had the opportunity of seeing a program. There was a program honoring / celebrating women in marketing, and there was meant to be a discussion on it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I'm looking at the panels, and then I'm seeing like 2-3 men. And I remember I looked at it and I'm like, okay, so this is a platform to celebrate women, to talk about women, and yet men are still finding a way to be in that conversation, to be a part of that, especially because it wasn't even like, say it be in Africa, for example. I did notice that there is a man on the panel, but I was like, okay, it's about 90% women to 10% men. Okay, I could let that go. But that particular panel for marketing communications and celebrating women in marketing communications was like 60% men and 40% women. And I was wondering exactly how do you, has that ever happened to you? Like, have you ever had to be a part of something like that where it's meant to be celebrating women and celebrating their achievements, and then you find out that it's still overpopulated by men when it's not like women are not in marketing communications?
Of course, it happens all the time, but I think that it's important to have men as part of the conversation, and I'm sure you understand that. But I don't think that it should be a dominant voice, especially seen as it was a women's event. I think sometimes people get, and I don't want women to get exhausted. There's this thing that women are like, oh, another event of women talking to women. What you have to understand is that there's been years and years and decades of men talking to men being on panel, men's voices being heard. And even we as women are conditioned to hear men's voices when it comes to a voice of authority. And so the more we are able to have gatherings, especially opportunities to talk to each other, we should take those opportunities. I don't think people should get exhausted by the fact that, oh, another woman's event. I actually don't see it like that. I see it as this is what it takes to get to equity. This is what it takes to continue to reinforce these messages that it is okay if you don't think you're ready for a position to apply for it and get in there and learn. That's what it is about. That's what being out of your comfort zone is. If we stay in our comfort zone, we don't grow. So these conversations happen, and you never know who needs to hear it that day. So as much as it's important for there to be men involved, I don't feel that there is a reason for us to stop having conversations as women, continue to share our stories as women, and continue to make sure those stories are beamed out to the world as women. Because I think not only the way people see women is different, the way people see black women, because when I talk to you, I'm talking about a global world, because you're in a global world today. You can put a Twitter tweet out today, and that tweet can go global, and someone can call you and say, look, I want you to come and work on this other thing. So you're competing not against people. And now people can literally sit in their home and work on a brief in Nigeria. There's people that work on social media campaigns in Nigeria that live in the Philippines. So when I'm talking to you, I'm talking about how the world sees us, not just how we see ourselves in Nigeria, because we're competing on a global level. So when you look at the way the world sees you, they see you differently because you're a black woman. So it's important for your voice to start to be part of a global voice, a global discourse, and people to expect it. So it's important for people to expect to hear women with accents on boards, women with accents on panels. Otherwise, we're going to continue to be left in the corner rather than being out in front and being visible, where our voices can be heard and where real change can happen. And I think for me, it's important for more women. And what I've done in the past when I've been on panels like that, I've called out the people there, not in a bad way. There's a nice way of doing it. It's the same way that when you're in a meeting and you've been saying something for the last 2 minutes and no one heard you, and then a male colleague says it, and then you just say, thank you for doing that. Thank you for repeating what I said. And you don't do it in a mean way. You don't do it in a mean-spirited way. You say, thank you for amplifying my voice. And that's fine. It's a compliment. But the room understands what just happened. And I think that's important. I don't think you have to be malicious about it. I mean, in the beginning of my career, I used to be so frustrated in meetings because I'm like, I just said that. I just did this. Oh, I would do we would work on a group presentation, and then halfway through the presentation, you find that someone else is taking over the presentation, and the person that presents the work is the person that did the work. That's how the world sees it. And so really for me, it's always been about, okay, how do you present this work so people understand your contribution? Because once again, women are always like, oh, I don't want people to think I'm taking credit for their work, and but people do take credit for other people's work. So you have to be conscious of saying, these are the people that worked on this, but you have to present the work. Anytime there's an opportunity to present the work, you have to present the work, because that's the person people remember.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your session. I find the moves you took in your careers and the changes from TV, radio, then production and all, I find it very interesting. And I wanted to ask, like you said, a lot of times women were limited, were scared to take that risk of, okay, what if, and then we're considering a whole lot of things as well, our personal growth as we grow and all that. At what point did you think it was necessary to make those moves? That's the question. And then how did you how did you face it? How did you just tell yourself, well, did you think you were perfect for the right position, for the next position before you took the move? Or it was just, you just thought, okay, I have a little thing here, I could work, I could get better. I know, I mean, what were the things that informed your decisions to make those moves? And then, was it really a case of, I'm bold, or you did it afraid, like that? Those are the things I want to know.
I wish I was that bold. No, I was not bold. I started out in marketing, and I had worked on a lot of marketing campaigns. So I was very comfortable with marketing. I was comfortable with consumer marketing. I had worked in a car company. I worked at a travel company. So I was very comfortable with any consumer marketing product I'd done. I'd worked at a online bookstore company. So all consumer-facing B2C businesses. And then I got tapped to work at first of all, it was children's media company, and to work in marketing. And the first day, so of course I applied and everything. I was excited. I started the job, and my first day on the job, it was such a different language. So that's the biggest challenge, is like every industry has its own language. So even though I was doing similar work, but they would say, I would come out of a meeting and I would have no idea what they just said. So I quickly made a friend in television. And so after every meeting, I would go through these words. I was like, well, this is pre-Google, so if there was Google, then it would have been different. So you have no excuse now, you just have to do it. But this was pre-Google, so I had to call my friend that worked in television, and I'm like, what does this word mean? Why would they say this? What does this mean? What did that mean? And literally every day I would have like these sessions where I was just literally taking notes in every meeting, writing down what I didn't understand, what I didn't know, and then finding out later what those things meant. And so there were times too where I felt like, I'm a fraud. They're gonna find out that I don't know what I'm doing. They're just gonna. I was like, I hope no one. I know. Of course, I would be in meetings like, please don't look at me. Don't talk to me. Just let me write all these words that I don't know, so I can go and learn. But then also too, there's always gonna be a learning curve in any job. And then 6 months later, I was giving presentations. I was talking. I planned this huge summit, and people were like, oh, I always thought you were in television. They would have never known that I didn't start out in television. And I think that's how you have transformational moments. And that's how you also know where your comfort zone is. Like for me, it was like, even though I was afraid, I knew I had arrived where I needed to be. Like I knew I needed to be in television, I needed to be in media. And every day that I was there, even though I was like afraid and scared and thought I would lose my job, I was like, I'm on probation, this is gonna not work. Every day that I also was having these other amazing moments, or working on these amazing projects, or people would pull me in and say, oh, we want you to work on this project. It's a new project we're starting in South Africa. I was in New York. I really wanted to continue to connect to Africa. So I knew that I was in the right place. I just needed to get through that phase. And then also too, then I got to a place where I became comfortable there. After 6 years, I was worried that I would become complacent. I kept on looking and thinking about what my next opportunity was gonna be. And through conversations, another opportunity came, and that opportunity meant that I could actually move back to the continent. So I'm very much into the 5-6 year plan. I know some people are 10, and then also some people can be at the same place for a very long time or do the same thing for a very long time.